Ashley Berges here today, and today we're going to be talking about when people get defensive. When they get defensive, when you've actually called out something that's truthful, when you're trying to express yourself, what do we do next? A lot of times when we have a situation that takes place and we need to point it out, we try to point it out, and sometimes when we're not dealing with people that want to take responsibility, they don't. They don't take responsibility for it. But not only do they not take responsibility for the poop in the pool, they actually offset that entire conversation, find fault in us, become super defensive, and then we find ourselves doing what? Backtracking. Okay? And I think we've been doing this for a while, and because if you're good at this, this means you have practice. So many of us have practice, well, maybe from our childhood. I know I do, because I remember there were many times in the very beginning when I was pretty young that I called out the poop in the pool, and guess what? I found out pretty quickly, stop doing it. Because you know what? You can get in trouble. You get in trouble, you get the silent treatment, you might get grounded, you get general attitude, maybe you could slap on the butt, nothing I want to experience. So I realized just to kind of keep my mouth shut after a while. But then I realized the impact of that throughout my life, right? The impact of that growing up, the impact of that being on my own, the impact of when you would call something out, when somebody did do something that wasn't right or wasn't ethical or wasn't the best situation or wasn't thoughtful or was greedy, and you call it out. And you call it out in a positive way. Hey, I didn't really appreciate that. Is there a way that we can take care of this a different way? Or hey, I didn't agree to that. Can we go back and discuss what I did agree on, or whatever it was, right? But when we call that out, it becomes this insane argument where the other person becomes super defensive, right? And then they go on and offset what happened. We don't ever discuss that again. So whatever happened, the poop in the pool goes away, it vanishes. And then the person becomes that either the victim, I can't believe you're doing this to me. I mean, how could you do this to me? After all the years of service, or after all the years of loyalty, after all the work I put in this, after all the hours, whatever the words are, I think you know what I'm talking about. And so then they go through that diatribe of how you should be, you should be basically kissing their ass, is what they're saying, is that they've done all these things for you and you have the audacity of even bringing this up. Okay. What I've realized too is that there's really no end to that. Usually what happens is that you can try to come back with, yes, I appreciate some of the work that you've done. They will keep going on about how you don't know how much work I've done and you just don't get it, okay? And it just keeps on going, right? And it's hard because at what point do you continue the conversation? And I feel like a lot of us get into that part where we almost shut down. Like it's almost like we're so overwhelmed with the fact that it doesn't feel like we're getting anywhere, we begin to feel as though we should shut down. And then you see the text scrolling or the messages coming in or the emails coming in, and it's almost like it puts you into almost a place of inaction. And I think it happens because a lot of us have, and I'm not making fun of this, but I think some of us have PTSD from some of this stuff because of childhood. Is like when you called out a parent and things would happen, and the defensiveness and the anger, I think that anger gets you back as a kid almost. And you don't know what to say, and you feel like you're being backed into a corner, and there's no resolve. And then it's almost like a helpless feeling, right? Because it feels helpless. It's like, I called this out. I was really unhappy about why this happened. I was extremely unhappy. I tried to call it a situation, but now I can't even have my own feelings or thoughts. And so if I try to have them, then next thing you know, I'm going through this diatribe. And I've found that a lot of folks, because we've been dealing with this for a long time, when they start giving us the victim reality or the martyr reality, over time it starts digging into us, right? It starts digging into us. And we start feeling sorry. We start feeling bad. We start feeling that we're on the hook. God, and then you start trying to figure out how to make it right almost, even though nothing's been made right for you. Okay? And I've even found myself, and I'm sure you have before, where you're trying to send a happy message or you're trying to send something with emojis or whatever, but it's not being accepted and it's not even being looked at that point, right? And then there goes into the guilt. Because when you were growing up, and when many of us were growing up, right, we dealt with that, and then we were made to feel guilty for bringing it up. I feel guilty for bringing this up. I shouldn't have brought this up. Everything was fine before I brought it up. Now I brought it up, and now everything's really not fine, and this person's really mad at me, and they're really upset with me, and I don't even know what to do. And it's interesting. And the last time this happened to me, the person went on to the victim reality. They went on that diatribe. They turned around and did a passive-aggressive thing to me as well. So they turned around and I asked them to do something, and they did the exact opposite. Okay? Which is extremely passive-aggressive in nature. And the crazy thing about it is some of these times people do it and they hurt everybody in the process just to be passive-aggressive. They even hurt themselves in the process because it's like they can't help themselves but to be passive-aggressive and to do the opposite of what everybody needs them to do. The next thing that I realize is that once that happens, there's some anger and some resentment, right? Because we felt anger and resentment in our past, right? But the anger and resentment quickly goes because the other person creates this guilt, okay? They create the guilt and they start talking about everything they've ever done for you in your entire life, okay? Everything. And it's interesting because when you really accumulate it up, they haven't done really anything for you, or at least very little. And it's interesting how everything that they've done has this huge price tag on it. Everything they've done is way more expensive than you'll ever know. It took them way more time than you'll ever understand. You know what I'm saying? And so you start kind of getting into that, and then all of a sudden the resentment and anger slowly over time turns into guilt. And it turns into kind of like, well, what do I do next? And the sad thing is a lot of us are in relationships with a family person, like a family member. Could be a parent, could be a sister, brother, could even be a spouse. Where what do you do? I mean, like in this situation, it's like you really cannot win one argument. And it's not even an argument. It's really out of self-defense. Because the only way for me to not have had this argument, now I want you to think about it, in this last situation that I dealt with, the only way that I couldn't have had the argument is if I never brought it up to light, if I never talked about the poop, and just agreed and acquiesced to something I did not want to do. If I would have done that and signed the dotted line like this person wanted me to do, nothing would have happened. Everything would have been fine. There would have been smiles and happiness to go around. And I would have been the one that sucked it up and just said, you know what, I did this to keep the peace. And the last time, I didn't do it. And I haven't been keeping the peace when I'm dealing with this stuff because I have no reason to keep the peace when I'm in a volatile, somewhat toxic situation. So think about it. When was the last time you were involved with the situation? How did you deal with it? Did you eventually acquiesce and apologize? Or did you let the relationship go? I mean, or did you just allow the silent treatment? Because sometimes the silent treatment becomes overwhelming to people, right? And we get overwhelmed by it, and you'll do whatever to get that person to start talking again. But do you see how this game is being played? And do you see how you can be easily susceptible to this game? Because susceptibility is an interesting thing, and I want you to think about this. And this is an example I want to give you before I leave today from this video. Is that it's interesting. For example, if you've never grown up in a family dynamic where you were talked down to, okay, where you were judged, where you were made to feel bad about yourself. If you're in a relationship with someone and they talk down to you for the first time or make you feel bad about yourself for the first time, you're literally going to be like, whoa, whoa, well, what's this? What is this? I mean, what are you trying to say to me? I don't understand, because it really feels like a put down to me. I mean, I'm just saying, you would call it out. Because guess what? It's not familiar. The more familiar something is, the more we accept it. Okay? So the familiarity of not being heard and the familiarity of allowing this person to walk all over us is why we allow it. And so I know that some of us are in relationships that are really challenging as far as, you know, how do I let this go? I got kids involved, I got family involved, I got all this stuff. Well, that's something that we're going to have to figure out, how we become heard, if it's even possible. And if it's not, what's the next step? But for some of us where that is not true, and we can dislocate and get some emotional distance from this person, right? This is the best case scenario. Because how do we have a friendship or relationship with someone that we can't talk to, that we can't have a communication with, that we can't have honest dialogue with? I mean, where do we go with that? And, you know, because I feel like we only accept it because we're used to it. It's familiar. I mean, the first time that someone does something to you that you don't accept, you're going to call it out. But if you're used to people doing things like that to you throughout your life that you don't accept, it's hard to call out, because guess what? You've been hurt. You've been told to shut up. You've been told that you're not right. You've been told to let it go. You've been told that the other person is a martyr. You've been told that the other person does everything for you and you just don't give a shit. Okay? And that's what I want us to really think about, because if you're going through this, what I found is that we sit there and say, maybe that person's going to wake up. Maybe that person's going to see that they have responsibility to take. But what I found is very few people, when they're being like this toward us and being argumentative and being massively defensive and not looking at the issue and not even accepting even a little bit of the blame, that's when we have to step back and say, how much longer am I holding out false hope for the situation? And I want you to ask another question and think about this. It happens one time, that's one thing. How many times does this happen in this relationship? How many times have you called something out and it completely goes another direction, where literally the conversation goes in circles and it never touches on what they did, and they're constantly the victim and you're just the asshole for calling it out? And how many times does it happen to the point where you stop doing it? And see, that's where it gets scary, right? Because once we stop standing up for ourselves, once we stop saying how we feel in a positive way, in a positive or neutral emotional way, right? We're not being mean, we're not getting agitated, we're not fighting, we're trying to be neutral and trying to express ourselves. When we are no longer able to express the truth in a situation, where does that leave us? And I think many of you have been hitting your head on the proverbial wall for a long time. And, you know, I don't really deal with this that much anymore, because I work so hard to really look at every relationship I have and emotionally distance myself from people that have those potentials. But ever so often you get a little sneak attack. But I don't really think it's a sneak attack. I actually think that consciously, to some degree, we know we've been so programmed, right? And it's like some people go, oh, we didn't see it coming. Well, did we see it coming or did we not? Or have we been programmed to have those types of people around us? And I think we have to look at that, understand it, ask ourselves, have we been able to be honest with this person? Can this person accept my comments in a positive or neutral way? Not in a negative way, just positive, neutral. Hey, can we talk about this? You know, if they can accept it and listen to you and accept some responsibility for what they've done, wow, kudos, that's great. But if they can't, what do we do with this relationship? Because it's one way. There's nothing there. It's either their way or the highway. And then that's when we lose our self-esteem, our self-worth, and our identity, for that matter. And that's important. These are things that we want to cherish, and these are things that we want to covet. And we definitely don't want to give those away just because, well, it's their way or their highway. I better get in to fit in, because if I say anything about the poop in the pool, I'm going to get clobbered emotionally, mentally, maybe even physically. Hopefully not. But the same point is that the emotional and mental beatdown is very bad. And, you know, and that's the thing, too, is that people say, well, it wasn't physical abuse. But think about the mental anguish. Think about the emotional anguish that comes with that. When feeling small and unable to tell our truth. When we tell our truth, we're beaten down for doing it, right? Something to think about. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. In the comment section below, let me know, when somebody has gotten defensive with you, how do you deal with that? Do you shut down, or do you have a solution for breaking through that defensive mechanism and making something happen and having them be able to see some of the responsibility that they need to take in the situation? I'm interested. I think all of us are interested. And I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video and the time to comment as well. And in the meantime, don't forget to live your true life.